The Carpenter is a 1988 film directed by David Wellington and stars Lynne Adams, Pierre Lenoir, and American cult B-movie legend Wings Hauser. The plot follows a mentally ill housewife who begins to encounter a mysterious carpenter at night, while her husband has a construction crew doing work on their house during the day. This is another one of those forgotten, or at least lesser known movies, thanks to people like the good folks over at Vinegar Syndrome. I can't actually remember if I had ever heard of this film, to be honest, prior to buying it. I just saw Wings Hauser on the cover, Vinegar Syndrome. It looks like a slasher. I was sold. And after watching it, yeah, I'd still call it a slasher with a story that goes for a little more. Does it work, though? Let's take a look. So first off, I wasn't really familiar with anyone here, I don't think, other than Wings Hauser. I mean, it is a Canadian film after all, and that always fascinates me anyways because, I love being caught off guard that way. This was actually David Wellington's directorial debut. He would direct a few more movies, but he's pretty much been a successful TV director ever since. It was also Doug Taylor's, writing debut. He would go on to write Splice, starring Adrian Brody. And to top that off, it was the beginning of David Franco's cinematography career. And recently, he's worked on stuff like Penguin and Alien Earth. So, you had a solid crew of young, talented Canadians. Just the opening sequence itself, screams, I'm a first-time director, but I've got ambition, a slow-motion table saw and wood chips flying, a very arty attempt, albeit kind of pointless. But that said, it's the first of numerous things that wouldn't work in any other movie, yet are oddly charming here. This is by no means a great movie. Some people would probably struggle to even call it a good movie, but it's a fun movie, So once the credits are through and you're, fully mesmerized by the wood chips, you meet our lead, Alice, played by Lynne Adams. I always want to call her Lynette Adams. I don't know if she looks like a Lynette to me, but she's Lynne Adams. She's being released from a psychiatric hospital where she was at after a mental breakdown and getting picked up by her douchebag husband, Martin, who is controlling and cheats on her constantly with one of his students. Can you imagine being cheated on by this guy right here? Alice, though, I found pretty likable from the start. She's been dealt a real shitty hand and just wants to make the most of it and move on, have a fucking normal life. So Martin brings her home and, to an older house that he bought that was never somehow completely finished. So during the day, there's a crew of, kind of goofy construction dudes working on the house. So it was pretty obvious early on that this would be a goofy watch. And, yeah, it sure was. Which at first, I gotta say, didn't completely work for me. But by the time this movie was over, I kind of just appreciated all of it. It's in a way, it's almost like the story takes place in an alternate universe. Because, ultimately every character here, all of them, they're just completely over the top and ridiculous. And again, this didn't work for me at first. I didn't like it right away. I found it kind of off-putting. And I also saw it as sloppy writing. And maybe it is, but, I'm just going to say that after, like I said, after thinking about it, stewing on this movie for a little bit after it was over, again, it all works for me. So at night, Alice is woke up by a carpenter working on the house. And it's late at night, so she goes, down and asks him, why he's working such late hours. Turns out his name is Ed, played by Wings Hauser, and she found him instantly likable and is pretty much, blindsided by his charm. And as the viewer, you are too. Yeah. He's polite. He has, the personality of someone, from a different era. Maybe the 40s or 50s or something like that. He's got that old school gentleman quality about him, I guess. But I will say that he has a dark history. And he seems to be protective over Alice or the house, or maybe both. And I'll also say that the reveal as to who he is was pretty clunky. Overall, but, because I think the scene should have been a little bit more effective than it was. I think the reveal should have had more impact. In fact, it doesn't seem to be a reveal that's taken serious by anybody, because even on Wikipedia, and I think IMDb pretty much tells you the reveal in the synopsis, which I guess I never really understood why people did that with certain movies. So I don't know. And the next time Alice meets Ed is where he kills one of the construction workers who was there to try and take advantage of Alice while Martin was out of town. It's kind of an awkward, goofy scene. Like he uses a power saw to cut off both of the dude's arms in a very awkward, ridiculous way. It's just a hilariously ridiculous scene. And Alice just kind of rolls with it and goes back to bed. It's hard to tell if Alice believes that Ed is actually there or not, because, which does make sense, because she does have moments where in her life, where she has a hard time kind of like separating reality from fantasy. And this because she tells the manager of the paint store during a job interview, in which she gets regardless, even after telling him that she has like these issues. It's an odd scene. Why she wants to work at the paint store, I'm really not sure. I don't remember it really leading to anything, but it does lead to more like wacky characters. So there is that. She also starts to form kind of a crush on Ed. I mean, her husband Martin is a fuckboy asshole, so it makes sense that she would, take interest in someone who would be nice to her like Ed is. Eventually, though, Alice learns about Ed and his past, continues to deal with Martin's bullshit, and, her own mental health issues. She's got a lot on her plate, I guess you'd say. The end does wrap things up nicely. All the loose ends are kind of tied up, but it wasn't super satisfying, maybe a little bit rushed, maybe not super earned. I don't know. Why am I even judging this film as if it's like a high art or something like that? But like I said, I think I've said it 3 times now. Ultimately, it just all kind of works for me. I just didn't realize that until after, after the movie was over. So, if you watch this and you're kind of on the fence about it the first time, give it another shot, when you're ready, and I think it might grow on you. I'm giving the Carpenter a 5 out of 10. It's a slasher trying to be more by, adding like supernatural touches. One of my main complaints, was that the kills were nowhere near as fun or over the top as they should have been, in a movie like this. So, it's not super satisfying if you judge it as a slasher, but, I enjoyed it, for the wacky, almost, Twin Peaks-esque type characters. I did enjoy Lynne Adams as the lead, although most of the performances here were not great. The exception being Wings Hauser, already having over a decade, maybe even almost 20 years acting experience at this point, and a pretty large number of roles if you check out his IMDb page. And speaking of the kills again, so this film initially was just edited all to hell, removing most of the scenes with gore, which is pretty bizarre for a slasher. Before the opening credits roll, you get this little card here. And the quality of the added footage is noticeably grainier, I would say. But I'm glad that, Vinegar Syndrome was able to find a way to add these scenes back in. The script could have been better, but it is interesting seeing, some of these people get their start here and went on to some pretty big things. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex. Subscribe right now, please.